October 16th, 2025, 3:35 a.m. In the cold darkness of northern Russia, a $200 million Russian Navy warship was resting silently on Lake Onega. The ship, a 950-ton missile carrier named Grad, floated peacefully on the 227-kilometer-long White Sea-Baltic Canal, a waterway that connects the White Sea to St. Petersburg. This was deep inside Russian territory, far from the war, far from NATO's eyes, and in what Moscow proudly called its secure heartland. The sailors believed they were safe, but within minutes, that belief would burn away. The first warning came as a faint alarm echoing across the deck. The crew thought it was a system error. Then the sirens screamed louder, the lights flickered, and panic spread across the bridge. It wasn't a malfunction. It was an attack. Just half an hour earlier, at 3 a.m., the ship's captain was asleep in his cabin, confident nothing could happen here. This was Karelia, near the Finnish border, over 1,000 kilometers from the Ukrainian front. No missile or drone had ever reached this far north. At the canal's control center in Petrozavodsk, an operator was calmly adjusting the water flow for a submarine convoy. His biggest concern was that his coffee might go cold. The Grad carried powerful caliber cruise missiles and advanced defensive weapons. But that night, its guard was down. Most of the crew was on leave, and the ship's close-in defense guns were set to stand by. The captain believed Lake Onega was a sanctuary. He was wrong. What seemed like Russia's safest harbor was actually its softest target, the widest, slowest, and most exposed section of the entire canal. And Ukraine had found it. The story began days earlier. In a hidden command truck somewhere near the Ukrainian front, operators from the 184M Signal Intelligence Unit picked up unusual radio traffic deep inside Russia. It was an encrypted command frequency used by the Black Sea Fleet. But this signal came from near St. Petersburg, nearly 1,000 kilometers away from where it should be. That discovery raised alarms in Kiev. Ukraine's analysts immediately turned to satellite surveillance, scanning ship traffic across the White Sea-Baltic Canal. What they saw stunned them. A vessel the size and shape of a 184M-class warship, identical to those of the Black Sea Fleet, was anchored right in the middle of Lake Onega. Then came confirmation from inside Russia itself. Ukraine's secret GUR Ghost Cell, operating undercover in the north, confirmed the vessel's name. It was the Graduation, hidden by the Russians in what they thought was a safe inland harbor. For Ukraine, this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. A priceless warship, undefended and overconfident, sitting quietly in a lake that no one believed could ever be attacked. But the challenge was enormous. The area was heavily guarded by S-400 missile systems that protected St. Petersburg, and Pantsir S-1 short-range defenses nearby. A normal airstrike would never get through. So, Ukraine planned something different, an attack built on stealth, intelligence, and deception. The weapon chosen was Liuti, a long-range drone capable of traveling 1,200 kilometers and carrying a 75-kilogram explosive warhead. But what made it lethal was its mind. Liuti used a triple guidance system, an inertial navigation unit that could follow preloaded terrain maps without GPS, a GNSS receiver resistant to Russian jamming, and an advanced electro-optical infrared seeker that could identify its target visually and thermally. Still, Liuti needed protection to reach the target. 2 modified Banshee LR drones were sent with it, decoys equipped for electronic warfare. Their mission was to fly slightly higher and noisier than Liuti, jamming Russian radars and creating momentary blind spots for the main drone to pass through unseen. The 3 drones took off from a secret Ukrainian base and flew north, low and fast, across hundreds of kilometers of forests, rivers, and frozen plains. They traveled through remote areas of Russia, where radar coverage was weakest. 3 hours later, a Russian Nebo-M radar in Tver briefly caught a trace. Before the operator could act, one of the Banshee drones fired a narrow jamming beam that filled the radar screen with white noise. The signal disappeared. The Russians dismissed it as static interference. 100 kilometers from Lake Onega, a Pantsir S-1 air defense unit detected 2 low-flying targets approaching. The commander saw only the decoys, the 2 Banshees, and prepared to fire. The real threat, the Liuti, was several kilometers behind, hugging the treetops, invisible to radar. As the Banshees climbed higher to draw fire, Russian gunners launched missiles at them. The decoys did their job perfectly, keeping all attention fixed on themselves, while Liuti slipped quietly below, undetected and unstoppable. At exactly 3:35 a.m., Liuti's infrared seeker came alive. It scanned the vast surface of Lake Onega, matching what it saw with images stored in its memory. Then, lock confirmed. The warship was right where Ukraine expected it to be. Its engines were cold, but the ship still glowed faintly in the thermal spectrum. The drone's engine roared as it began its final dive. The sound ripped through the silence like a chainsaw cutting steel. Seconds later, Liuti slammed into the ship's engine room, its weakest point. The explosion tore through the hull, igniting the ship's fuel tanks. A thunderous secondary blast followed as ammunition and fuel detonated. Flames shot into the night sky, lighting up the calm lake like daylight. Debris rained into the water. Russia's safest harbor had turned into a burning battlefield. But this was more than just a single attack. It was psychological warfare, a message that no place in Russia was beyond reach anymore. For centuries, Russian military thinking had relied on strategic depth, the idea that its enormous landmass would always protect it from invasion. But in one night, that myth was shattered. Lake Onega was not just a lake, it was the beating heart of the White Sea-Baltic Canal, a route built a century ago by the forced labor of Gulag prisoners. It connects Russia's northern ports to its industrial centers and serves as a secret military highway. Nuclear submarines, warships, and hidden cargo often move through it unseen. And now, Ukraine had struck it right in the middle. The destruction of the Grad sent shockwaves through Moscow. Russian analysts called it the moment geography stopped protecting Russia. In this new era of warfare, where artificial intelligence, drones, and electronic deception rule the sky, there were no more safe zones. The front line had dissolved into an invisible web stretching from Ukraine's trenches to Russia's northernmost lakes. Strategic depth had turned into strategic vulnerability. Inside the Kremlin, encrypted chat lines buzzed with fear. Generals and advisors were shaken. "If we're not safe there," one message read, "we're not safe anywhere." Panic spread through St. Petersburg's elite. Lake Onega was their backyard, home to the dakas, resorts, and summer yachts of Russia's rich and powerful. For years, they had watched the war from television screens while enjoying coffee by the lake. Now, that same lake was burning. The illusion of safety had vanished. The unwritten promise, "Stay loyal and you will be protected," was broken. For the first time, the war had reached the doorsteps of Russia's ruling class. Now, the Kremlin faced an impossible dilemma. Should they pull their advanced S-400 systems back from the front lines to protect inner regions like Karelia and St. Petersburg? Or should they keep them at the border, leaving their heartland exposed? Either choice was dangerous. Move them back, and Ukraine could push forward on the battlefield. Keep them at the front, and Ukraine's long-range drones could continue striking deep inside Russian territory. This was Ukraine's new weapon, not just explosions, but exhaustion. A form of strategic suffocation that left Moscow trapped between fear and failure. The attack on Lake Onega wasn't just a strike, it was a turning point in modern warfare. It proved that precision, innovation, and intelligence could defeat a bigger, richer enemy that relied on arrogance and size. In one single night, Ukraine had turned Russia's safest inland lake into a symbol of its weakness. There were no more safe zones, no more secure borders, and no more comfort for those who once believed war would never reach them. The Grad burned for hours, its reflection glowing across the dark water. That glowing wreck told a new story: the end of distance, the death of safety, and the dawn of a new kind of war. Ukraine had reached deep into the heart of Russia and found its greatest weakness: